friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very, very high above all the bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Saturday. Far too often, our political discussions stray from the essential principles that allegedly make them up. Often, instead of relying on those principles that undergird our individual political philosophies, we stray into the idea that we should enact a policy that is better for this group or better for that group or better for another group entirely. It is a common refrain among the political class that we should do as much good as possible for the greatest number of people. The ensuing argument, then, is in the approach. Is it better to do it from a more democratic set of principles? That is it more advantageous to have an increased amount of government involvement in whatever policy we're discussing, a more top-down approach, if you will, that results in a one-size-fits-all type of decision? Or is it better to accept the rules of the game and adhere as closely as possible to those rules when enacting government policy? Obviously, I'm not a fan of the one-size-fits-all do-it-my-way type of scenario. But there's also a third choice, and that's to disregard either one of those and disregard the rules of the game and make your decisions based upon what's best for the individual. And of course, the only person who can make that decision is the individual themselves. Most people have probably not worked through the thought experiment of what it actually means to be a member of whatever political party or political ideology they claim to adhere to. Instead, we tend to be more tribalistic about our political beliefs. I'm a member of the Republican Party, and therefore whatever the Republican Party says is the one I'm going for. The problem with that type of thinking, whether you're on the left or the right, is it excludes the possibility that the political party is actually wrong about something. Take, for example, this big, beautiful bill that President Trump and the Republicans have been pushing. There are a lot of things that, taken by themselves, are actually good. For example, removing suppressors from the National Firearms Act and allowing you to buy them over the counter just like you would a pistol or a rifle. That, in and of itself, is a very good thing. The Second Amendment is very clear. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The federal government does not have the power to regulate firearms or their accessories. Firearm regulations are absolutely outside of the enumerated powers. And yet, we regulate them all over the place. Also, in the big, beautiful bill, the BBB, is a no tax on tips or overtime. I also think that those are probably a good thing. Taxation is nothing more than legalized theft anyway. I'm not saying that we should do away with all taxes. Obviously, we need some of them. I like to drive on nice, smooth roads, and it's probably a good thing to be able to pay for a police department. But any taxes over and above what is absolutely necessary to cover the essential functions of government are nothing more than legalized larceny. So it's a good thing that we're doing away with some taxes. And frankly, those taxes affect the poorest among us the most, those people who have service-type jobs that rely on tips for their livelihood. But also included in the BBB is a $4 trillion spending increase and a huge increase in the debt and very few spending cuts. Not good at all. And then there's the overarching problem that all of the things, and I've only mentioned 4 of them, are jammed into one big giant omnibus bill. The very thing that most of us have complained about for a very long time, that they take a whole bunch of unrelated crap, throw it into one bill, drop it on the desk at 12 a.m., and you're expected to read the 1,200 or 1,500 or however many pages it is before you vote on it the next morning. Last time I checked, most conservatives are against this whole omnibus type of thing. And still, there's a whole bunch of conservatives that I genuinely like that are totally going to vote for it. The argument is that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and perhaps it is for a lot of the provisions of the BBB. Making the Trump tax cuts permanent is a huge part of it. The suppressors that I mentioned before, there's no way we'd get that through if we didn't have control of both houses of Congress and the White House. But expediency has been used for a whole bunch of other bad stuff that's been inflicted on American citizens as well. Need I remind you of Obamacare that was passed on Christmas Eve in the middle of the night? And I think we would be remiss if we didn't also include the Patriot Act in this whole discussion. What I'm getting at here is nothing ticks voters off more when conservatives and Republicans, and there is a difference between those two, get elected and then they start doing Democrat type of things. And there's no better example of that than a big, gigantic omnibus bill. For whatever good that it does, and there are a lot of really good things contained in the BBB, it still adds a $4 trillion increase in the debt limit. And don't kid yourself. Democrat and Republican presidents all spend like drunken sailors. Usually the only difference is an order of magnitude. Our nation's debt is not some esoteric abstraction that doesn't mean anything. Eventually, we are going to have to pay it off in one way or another, and sooner rather than later. And think about it, a lot of Republicans and conservatives got elected by saying stuff like the government spends too much and we're taxing the bejesus out of you. And then they go to Washington and vote for a $4 trillion increase in the debt. Republicans acting like Democrats by disregarding their principles and focusing on what's most expedient and what's best for the moment. Like I said, there is a lot of good stuff in the big, beautiful bill, but there's also a $4 trillion example of how conservatives get themselves unelected. The good news is the big, beautiful bill is going to pass, and there are some tax cuts in it, and there's some other good stuff. But conservatives would be wise to take the next step after that bill's passage and actually enact some meaningful spending cuts. We'll see if that actually happens. If Republicans want to maintain and expand their congressional majorities, they'll follow through and not do what they almost always do, which is get to Washington and start acting like Democrats. Okay, moving on. Recently, and I'm sure you've seen this, there's been a lot of discussion in the media of how terrible the poll numbers are for Democrats. And they are. But that doesn't mean that the Democrat Party is not as formidable as it always is. I just spent the last 8 minutes explaining to you how the Republicans, if they don't do things right, have handed the Democrats the perfect argument for the next election. Look at them! They promised you a whole bunch of stuff and then they didn't follow through. Don't you really just hate lying politicians? Vote for me! I won't do that. See what I mean? Pretty easy. But the question is, who do they have that's actually going to be appealing to voters and can make that argument in a convincing way? I don't really see that they have a whole lot of people on their back bench. There's AOC. Do you really think that she can win an election outside of New York? Frankly, the best thing for the Republican Party is for AOC to just keep talking. And then there's the guy on the left coast, Gavin Newsom, who's done everything within his power to destroy the state and yet still thinks that he can run for a national office. The leftist media hasn't closed up shop yet, and by the way, their ratings are in the toilet too. Every left-leaning broadcasting network has historically low ratings, which tells you a lot about the tenor of the American public that we're just not buying the leftist line anymore. But still, they haven't closed up shop. Now, they may have moderated their content a little bit. Jeff Bezos is getting rid of opinion writers at the Washington Compost who don't want to advocate for personal liberty and free markets. But how long do you really think that's going to last? And do you really think that that's a genuine act, or is it simply meant to endear himself to the Republican majority and to the White House? When you consider all the drivel that he's published the last 8 years, it's not difficult at all to answer that question. Jeff Bezos and the rest of the leftist communist media are smart enough to be able to make the simple political calculation that they need to moderate their content for the next 3 years. They know that the collective memory of the American electorate is pretty short. And so they back off for a few years, and by that time, one of their existing candidates, the Gavin Newsom or the AOC or somebody else perhaps in Pennsylvania, will have risen high enough in political visibility that they could be a viable presidential candidate. Or the other option we've already talked about, that Republicans will make enough political mistakes to make the Democrat argument for them. There's another part of this whole equation that we really haven't talked about. It would be a monumental mistake to assume that the Democratic strategists on America's political left are not just as skilled as those on our side. American politics, and politics at the state level too, works like a pendulum. And the Democrats know this, that for every wide swing to the right, there's an equal and opposite reaction, usually in a couple of years, that swings that pendulum all the way over to the political left. Usually, all the Democrats have to do is be patient and wait for the Republicans to screw up. You've seen the meme on social media that hard times create strong men, that strong men create good times, and that good times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times again. It's pretty true when you compare it to politics. But the real question for Republican strategists to answer is, how do we prevent weak people, that is the Democrat Party, and I don't mean weak in the sense that they're not effective or they can't win elections. Clearly, that's not true. What I do mean, though, is weak-minded and weak in principle. Anyway, I wanted to answer the question, is why does it appear that Democrat strategists think that they're in a good position to win elections? They can see the poll numbers just as clearly as we can, and Ray Charles could see that Trump's popularity is only increasing. So why do they think they have a snowball's chance on a Wyoming prairie in August? I thought we should talk to our friend Chris Adamo, the author of the book Rules for Defeating Radicals, to see if he has an answer to my question. And we'll do that next. But first, an absolutely obnoxious profit timeout. Today's installment of Weekend Update is brought to you by Morton Buildings. There's only 2 seasons in Wyoming: winter and construction. And if you hadn't noticed, we're not exactly dealing with all that white crap right now, which means it's the perfect time for you to start thinking about that building you were dreaming about all winter long. You know, the one that would have kept all of your toys out of the snow? Yeah, that one. The first people you should call are Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They are the experts in metal building construction. They've been doing it longer than anybody else around, and they definitely do a much better job. So it doesn't matter if you're thinking about a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger like a roping arena or a giant warehouse. Nick and Jesse are the 2 guys you need to call. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. Are you one of those people that said something dumb like this during the election?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
Yeah, especially for liberals like you. Anyway, if you said something like that and you need to get the heck out of Dodge or be gone Johnson, you need to call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. So it doesn't matter if you're buying or selling, give my friend Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. One more time, that's 307-699-3519.
Here at U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow Cowboy State Politics. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. And when you're done listening to this episode, do me a favor and rate the program. It helps Cowboy State Politics go up in all the algorithms. So when you're done listening to this, rate the program 5 stars. I appreciate it, and it helps get the program out to more conservative listeners. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics, and I'm your host, David Iverson. Before the break, I told you that I wanted to see if I could get an answer to why Democrats think they have a prayer in winning any election anytime soon. So I got in touch with our friend Chris Adamo, author of the book Rules for Defeating Radicals. Here's our conversation. I'd like to welcome back to the program, author of the book Rules for Defeating Radicals, Chris Adamo. Chris, welcome back to the show.
I really appreciate being on here with you, Dave.
The reason I wanted to have you on is, everywhere we look, we're seeing, the Democrats are in disarray, that they don't have a unifying message, that they're so deep in the polls that really we don't have to worry about them ever again. And I don't think that that's true. There's a number of reasons for it. And there's this piece in The Blaze entitled "The Democratic Party is Not Dying, It's Evolving." And so I wanted to talk to you. I mean, you're the guy that wrote the book on how to beat these people. So what's your take on all this? Are the Democrats in this this deep chasm that they'll never get out of?
Well, yes and no. They're in a death spiral, nothing less. However, they've been in a death spiral many times in the past, and the rhinos ride in to the rescue. Some of it is cowardice. Some of it is ineptitude, and some of it is you have closet leftists in the GOP. It's just that simple. I'm pointing to that guy sitting at the governor's desk down in Cheyenne here. We won't mention names until you're ready. But
you can call him anything you want.
But yeah, it is just that simple. I'll give you one example. When you consider the absolute repugnance of the 2016 Democrat candidate for president, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Okay, now they were in a death spiral. The GOP mainstream, their guy in 2016 that was going to rescue America from Hillary Clinton, remember who their guy was? Jeb Bush. There's no situation that the Democrats can screw up so badly that the rhinos can't do them one worse. Okay, and that's the overarching message I would give in response to this article and in response to everything we're dealing with on the political scene, is that the Democrats what they have is a disaster. They've been actually forced through social media, through Rush Limbaugh, through heroes like Dave Iverson. They've been actually forced to show who and what they are. It's a disaster. The average person on mainstream hates it. Okay, now that's the good news. The bad news is the Republican establishment, the good old boys that have dominated things nationwide for years, their message is, we don't want to be too extreme. So we got a great campaign slogan here. We're not quite as bad as the Democrats.
we're not nearly as bad as
much. Yeah. And then we'll give you half as much. So vote for us. And on that basis, they lose when they snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, as it's been said.
I interviewed a guy the other day, and the question was, largely the same one that I asked you. Are the Democrats in disarray? Are they, so far down in the polls they'll never come back? And the reason I asked him that is the Democrats clearly believe there are some people in their party that they think can run for president. Maybe it's Bernie. Well, Bernie Sanders probably isn't on the list for the actual mainstream Democrats. But look at how much media coverage Gavin Newsom is getting. Now, you and we would never look at Gavin Newsom and say, yeah, that's a guy that could get elected. We think he's further left than even the left coast. Maybe he's out there in the ocean somewhere. But there are some people in the Democrat Party that look at Gavin Newsom and see him as a viable candidate. And, the Democrats have strategists, just like the Republicans do. And even some of them are saying, this Gavin guy, he may not be so bad. Well, do they know something that we don't? Are they seeing something that we're not getting? I mean, why would they think that these people that are clearly so radical could make a good candidate?
Because they're good liars. And not only the people saying that they're a good candidate, but the candidate themselves. I mean, Gavin Newsom, on occasion, when the camera rolls around and on election time, Gavin Newsom's out there and he's dressed to look like the statesman and whatever. You ought to see him the rest of the time. His behavior, his demeanor is literally childish. Now, here's the question. Our side gets called mean-spirited and extreme if we point out those things. Typically, our side backs off at that point. Well, I don't want to be seen as mean-spirited or extreme,
Right.
which, number one, I'm validating the accusation at that point. Number two, I'm taking what should be a winning issue for me, and I'm just abandoning it because I'm told I don't have permission to use it. Okay, every step of the way, when we let them define the political landscape, I pick your issue. When they define the political landscape, it's going to be 100% fraudulent, 100% on their terms. And if we try to go in and color inside the lines that they've drawn for us, we lose. It's just that simple. It always goes back to that. So how did Trump win? He didn't worry about them saying he was extreme. He didn't worry about them saying when he's running against that towering intellect of Kamala Harris, he didn't worry about them saying he's racist because he's calling her out for being such a buffoon. He didn't worry about any of that. A misogynist because she's a woman. He didn't worry. What he said is, here's the issues. Here's where she stands on it. Here's where I stand on it. Now, two things. He had to say that, and he had to have a track record to prove it, because I could show you quotes of John McCain back when he was in a close race with a strong conservative Republican in Arizona, and he was a border hawk like nobody you've
Oh,
ever
yeah, he's
heard.
the most conservative then.
2 weeks before the election, and her name is Dr. Kelly Ward, he had, I believe, it was multiple times the amount of funding that she had, and he beat her in the primary by 10 points. He bought the election, okay, but he had to do it by sounding conservative. Okay, now, does anybody believe he really means it? Well, unfortunately, enough voters in Arizona presume that there was some element of sincerity. Day after the primary is over, he's right back to business as usual. This is the typical pattern, and we've seen it across the country. It's a disaster. We also saw it in Cheyenne, and God bless people like, I'll mention Mr. Pendergraft there, that we have these people who actually stand. They face the music, they face the onslaught and the accusations, and they say, no, I'm not going to operate within those boundaries you dictate to me. I'm not going to defend myself against your baseless accusations. I'm going to stand on truth. And at that point, they're unbeatable.
Yeah, one of the things I always tell conservatives, and people that are, and especially people that are new, like getting into politics, is lesson number one is don't ever accept the premise, ever. If it's coming from the left, it's their premise is mistaken. It's specious. It's never going to benefit you. So don't ever accept it. And that's one of the things that I like about this article that we're talking about, is I don't think that the author accepts the premise either. Listen to this phrase. Don't confuse collapsing party approval with electoral collapse. The left may be unpopular, but it's still powerful. And the author points to a number of different groups or a number of different things that explain that the Democrat Party is still a powerful force. They have an incredible ground game. I mean, that hasn't gone away. They pretty much have control of the media. That hasn't gone away. Now, the media is kind of sucking up to Trump a little bit because they need to for a couple of years. But nobody in the media has, magically become a conservative. And so all of the pieces are still there. And I just think it's folly for Republicans and conservatives to just assume that, because the towering intellect in the ivory tower, Kamala Harris, got her butt whooped, that all is lost for them. I don't think that's the case at all. You still have Bernie Sanders and AOC bringing in thousands of people at a rally that you and I would never be caught dead at.
Okay, well, a couple of things to there. First of all, you're right. They have the ground game and they have the media. Here's again where we can color inside their lines or break free of those lines. Okay, now as far as the media goes, and I don't say this to be patronizing in any way, but they've got ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN. We've got Dave Iverson. We've got
Fox.
Across the country. We have more and more. It's not as coalesced and organized. We've got The Blaze, where you got this article from. Okay. You have a group of people, and I can think of some elderly relatives of mine that they sit down for dinner, they turn on the TV and it's NBC News, and they hear how Trump is trying to sneak into old people's homes to starve people like Reagan did, and we can hear that kind of stuff. But overwhelmingly, you have an alternative media. The darkness can only maintain its stranglehold as long as there's no light shining. So that's breaking up. Okay, now the ground game, you're right about the ground game. What needs to happen with the ground game is we need to expose the dirty side of it. Okay, the fact that they get all these college activists to get out there and stump for votes, that's part of the First Amendment, literally. Okay, the fact that U.S. aid money has been coming from the federal government to pay those people to do that, that's criminal. That's an abuse of the system, and that needs to be stopped. Okay, now, are we going to do that? That takes us back to the Congress. Elon Musk, Doge, they came out and said, here's what needs to happen. What's our Congress doing? Well, we don't want to be too extreme because Elon Musk really caught flack for this. And so how do we sit the fence and maintain business as usual in order to keep the left from attacking us while telling our people that we're fighting for them or whatever? And so what did we see this last week? We saw this big thing that's going to change the future of the country. They're investigating the cocaine that was in the White House. Okay, now I'm all for criminals being put in jail for doing cocaine in the White House. That's not going to change the country. We've got these federal judges that are running foreign policy.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this for a fact, and I unequivocally, if the tables were turned and we had Kamala Harris in the White House and some Republican federal judge tried to run foreign policy, they would shut it down.
Oh, yeah.
And there's two things they would do. They would get out there and say so in the Congress, in the media. They would get out there and say so, and then they'd be taking action to impeach these judges. Well, we don't have the votes to impeach them. You know what? You impeach them anyway. You put them through the process. You show everybody what a fraud they are. Now, if your corrupt opposition party doesn't impeach them, now the ball's in their court. Okay, now they're the ones carrying the blame for that. We don't want to play that way. Come on. We got along for so many years. We were nice to them. They were nice to us. We all got to spend your money. Why would we want to change that?
Right.
Okay, this is where our side is failing. This is where we need to turn up the heat. And I would say step one in turning up the heat in this particular arena, obviously, is getting on the phone to Barrasso, getting on the phone to Cynthia Lummis, getting on the phone to Harriet Hageman. All of a sudden, my mind went blank. But getting on the phone to these people and saying, look, we're tired of business as usual. The biggest threat we face is not Democrat attacks on the country. It's Republican business as usual in response to it.
Right.
Don't send me your fundraising letters saying how much you need my money to do something different until I start seeing you do something different.
Right. Do something different, and then we'll give you some money, and then we'll give you a reason to, to campaign. Now, this last piece here, and this is the last thing I want to talk to you about, because I think that we may be misreading this as conservatives anyway. But it says, quote, let's also stop pretending that the Democrats lack a unified message. Their priorities are very, very clear. It's DEI, trans ideology, unlimited abortion, open borders, tax hikes to fund their coalition, and millions of people support this type of agenda. Now, most conservatives look at that and say there's no way that that's a winning message. And I don't really think that it is in places like Wyoming, but it is in other places. Look what Colorado is doing. I mean, they've passed recently a couple of things that are straight up the middle of this agenda. And so the thing that I have to ask is, so we look at that agenda and think they're absolutely bonkers, that nobody would vote for that. But there's some folks in the Democrat Party who are saying, no, this is the message, and we should be moving forward on it. So, I mean, at the very least, there's somebody in the Democrat Party that says this might be the way to go. So, question to you is, do they have somebody that's influential that thinks this is the way to go, or is this more of their pipe dream?
I think, again, I'm going to sound political myself here, giving you an answer. I think it's some of both. You definitely you have some radical leftists. You have. I believe in this article he mentioned college-educated women, college-indoctrinated women. Okay, leftist marinated women. Okay, now this and by the way, it's also the young guys too who are trying to impress these women. Okay, they've been put in this sewer at our taxpayer expense, and they come out thinking the way they're supposed to think. Okay, there is a lot of that. However, even these issues that you mentioned, if you watch, they don't come out, rarely come out, I'll say, and portray them in their true sense.
Sure.
For example, they don't talk about, we want to get all these women to kill their unborn babies so that the guys can get out there and have sex with them whenever they want and not have any responsibility. They don't say it that way. They say women's health care.
Yes.
Okay, everything that they do is going to be couched in some sort of platitude, some sort of euphemism. So one of the premises of my book there that I explain, and if our side could get a hold of this message and actually portray it to the public, oh yeah, there it is. Hey, good book. You people ought to be reading it. Okay, and hear me out now. I challenge people to prove me wrong on this. Leftists never care honestly about any issue, any cause they claim to champion. Never. Any issue. Okay, and I underline it. In their case, it's always a matter of exploiting the issue in order to manipulate people if they think they can gain politically from it. Let's just take this whole pro-women thing. Pro-abortion is pro-women. Kill your baby so the guys can use you when they want. But we're pro-women. You want to be liberated, so you vote for us. And what do all these little college women minions do? Yeah, they're out there voting for the Democrats. Now, let's look at that. Let's look at that, and let's take the other issue they care about so much, which is the trans situation. Okay, so now your daughter, who didn't sleep around and need an abortion, now she wants to run in sports. And what does she have to do? She has to dress in a locker room and undress in front of a guy who says he's a woman, who in many cases, these guys suddenly, when they're in the locker room with these gals, suddenly forget that they're a woman and they sexually assault
It becomes
these girls,
obvious.
okay? This is how much the Democrats really care about women. Okay, now, where are the Republicans saying that as stridently as that needs to be said? We can take any issue out there, and I can show you that same pattern, that they'll flip on it on a dime when it's politically expedient. Again, McCain being a border hawk, you hear the same kind of things from Democrats, right? Oh, they care about those immigrant families. They're not just immigrants, they're migrants. They're just travelers. Right. What does that do to your neighborhood? Your neighborhood, all of a sudden, is it a safe neighborhood? No, it's not, because you have these Venezuelan gang members and stuff moving in. Where are the people on our side stridently pointing that out? They're few and far between. In Colorado, you don't get the Jeb Bush candidates elected running against those leftists. What you get is the Lauren Boeberts, the people that they come out and they literally, they slash and burn the Democrat agenda. And this is what we need. This is how we're going to fight this fight. If we get it back to elements of truth, who are they really and who are we really? You're always going to have your few crazies that think Bernie and AOC are the dream ticket, but you're going to have, and by the way, a lot of those people at those rallies you mentioned were bussed from one rally to the next. We know that. But you're always going to have some of that. Now, do we respond to that out of fear, or do we just call it out for what it is? And the minute we call it out for what it is, you'll find you have a lot less of the Democrats supporting it and a lot more of them looking at, well, what's the alternative? That's how Trump won on the national scale.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect place to leave it. The book is called Rules for Defeating Radicals. Chris, welcome back to the program. And if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Okay, if you want to get a hold of me, you go to my Gmail, send me a message. It's adamocommentary@gmail.com.
Great. Well, Chris, again, thank you very much, and you have a good afternoon, my friend.
Keep up the great work, Dave.
Thank you. Well, that'll do it for today's installment of Weekend Update. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk again on Monday. It's going to be a great episode. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that so-called fundraiser that was held down in Cheyenne, and some more about the guy that was behind it, Jeff Wallach. It's like I keep saying, power does really weird things to people, and it certainly did during this session. So we're going to talk about all that on Monday. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.